Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am back for my Week 5 LCK overview, analysis, and of course, at the end, my power rankings. Obviously, this past week has been a little bit different in terms of the schedule. This one is coming out a day late here on Wednesday as opposed to the normal Tuesday for LCK videos. That is because over the weekend, I did player reviews and player rankings for all 4 of the major regions. Those videos took a lot of work to make and to produce and to get out on time. So if you're interested in content like that, in player reviews, player rankings, team rankings, etc., for all 4 of the major regions, you can go ahead and check out that playlist up in the top right corner right now. And it would really, really mean a lot if you went and checked out those videos. But, of course, we are here to talk about Week 5 in the LCK. Some really fun games this week. Definitely more of a week to determine where these teams actually stand. I definitely think some teams really showed out and showed up. So if you are excited, let me know down in the comments section below. But let's not waste too much time. Let's jump right into our first series of the week, and our first series of day 1 here was Hanwha Life Esports taking on T1. Now, of course, T1 is going to be able to take the series, but it's really funny that we start off with this one because this is probably the series with the most controversy of the week. Obviously, yesterday we released the LPL video talking about Bilibili Gaming's win over Rare Atom, where, you know, Rare Atom disconnects and there's no stoppage, no chrono break. Well, there was a chrono break in this series in Game 3. Unfortunately, it came probably 6 or so minutes after the problem actually occurred, and, you know, after the game had already been told to go on, so very, very interesting behavior. But let's talk about the series outside of that. T1 just looks really, really good. Obviously, Game 2 wasn't exactly the cleanest game, but, man, Game 3/Game 4, T1 was out for blood. That was a scary team. When this team wants to beat you, they're not just going to beat you, they're going to destroy you, as they did in Game 3 here. My player of the series should, no surprise, go to Gumayusi. He's really been up and down, I think, so far in 2022, especially in summer. I think he's had some really good games, but he's also had some games that I haven't, you know, he hasn't been the takeover presence that I think he was in spring, at least all the time. He's had performances, but they just haven't been consistent. He was really, really good in this. This is probably his best series since MSI, and his best game here on the Kalista in Game 3, especially. A dominating performance here from Guma to absolutely take over the game. But he was really good on the Ezreal as well in Game 1. Was able to dish out a lot of damage. Ezreal, as we're seeing pretty frequently around the world right now, is actually a pick that is pretty under the radar, I think, in terms of good AD carries. But he wasn't the only one who played well. Keria also had a pretty phenomenal series. And then Owner, I thought, did really well. Obviously, the chrono break screwing him the most in Game 3. Or I guess it screwed the bot lane, but it was because of Owner. Obviously, you have Owner having an extra smite. He tells the refs apparently twice. They do nothing about it. 6 minutes later, Gumayusi's 5-0, and all of a sudden they want a chrono break. Obviously, I would be very upset by that too, but, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. I thought everybody on the team played relatively well for T1. Really just a good team effort, but the bot lane was really the ones that were really, really hard carrying it, especially in that final game there. As for Hanwha Life, a little bit of an interesting series. Cheonny comes in here for Samdi, who's been in all year for Hanwha Life, and Cheonny definitely looks like an upgrade, even if he had a pretty rough couple of games, like a pretty rough Game 3, and especially a rough pre-chrono break Game 3, but he still looked alright. He was actually pretty good in their win in Game 2 here, and so was Dudu in the top lane, who actually seems to really be taking on the role as like the shining light of Hanwha Life, which is really weird to say, because this was the guy we were looking at as a really weak link for a team that was at Worlds last year, someone who couldn't even really get into the lineup over Morgan. And now Dudu honestly seems like he's someone who can actually play at an LCK level, and he actually played against Zeus pretty well here, which we haven't really seen a lot of top laners be able to do in the LCK, so those are the positives. The negatives are definitely on Fleek here, who's going to be my dud of the series. He had a pretty rough one, especially that Lee Sin Game 3. Lee Sin's a very difficult pick right now in the meta. We've obviously seen across the world that really, like, power-wise, it's not very high, but because all of these players have so much experience on the champion, they feel like they can play him at such a level, they keep picking him anyways, and we keep seeing players continuously underperform on Lee Sin, because I just think the champion's overall really weak right now. Unfortunately, OnFleek was definitely exposed to that in Game 3 here, as he got pretty much brutalized by Owner in the jungle matchup, and then by the time there was a late game, Faker was online on Corki, Goomba had a ton of kills on Kalista. It was pretty much over at that point, but honestly, the outlook for these two teams doesn't really change much. T1 is still the best team in the LCK. I've had them as the best team in the LCK all year, or all summer, all split at least, and I don't think that is going to change anytime soon, unless something ridiculous happens, like they lose to, I don't know, bro, like Fredit BRION. That would be something the LCK would produce, but I don't think that's changed. And Hanwha Life's not very good either. It is kind of good. It's kind of a positive note to take away that they actually were able to take a game off of T1 here in Game 2. Obviously, just fired T1 up a little more for Game 3, but, you know, taking a game off of T1 isn't exactly a nothing kind of thing. They didn't lose very often in spring, so it's a good look for Hanwha Life. They're still a bottom team. It certainly doesn't change my opinion on them too much, but they're going to be at least decently happy with the outcome. Moving on to the second series here of Day 1 in Week 5 of the LCK, we had Gen.G taking on Liiv SANDBOX. Liiv obviously outperforming a lot of expectations so far this split, but going up against Gen.G is a completely different story, and we absolutely see that with Gen.G taking a pretty convincing 2-0 win here. Obviously, Game 2, definitely much closer, but Game 1 was a stomp. I mean, utterly dominating. Let's talk about Gen.G. You can't really talk about Gen.G right now without talking about Ruler. I mean, I know Chovy's pretty freaking great, right? Like, we can all agree. We all love Chovy. Chovy's phenomenal. You know, you can't really say no to Chovy, one of the best players in the world. Like, we all really feel that. But, man, is Ruler the best player on this team? Like, I'm really starting to get that question mark because Ruler is so freaking good. He's the best AD carry in the world. I feel very, very proud to have made that statement for the last, like, 2 years in a row, and I just feel like I'm constantly being proven right when there's all these young AD carries coming up. Everybody wants to put him as the best ADC in the world or whatever. It's Ruler, and it keeps being Ruler. You just gotta believe in the guy, because it's just what he does. He's just the best. And, yeah, he was awesome here. Zeri Yuumi in Game 1 was disgusting to watch, but even the damage that he was putting out on Ezreal in Game 2, like I was saying earlier, I think Ezreal's a pretty underrated pick right now, and Ruler proves why, because holy shit, that Ezreal was doing damage. That dude hurt in that fight. And obviously, shout out to Lehens for the 2 games of Yuumi. You know, hope his hands are rested. So, but yeah, I mean, Doran also played a really good series here on Gen.G. I really think his Gnar games were really strong, especially in Game 1. I thought the Gnar game was pretty good. Peanut and Chovy, kind of the 2 people that they really focused around for the most part in Spring Split, were probably the 2 they least focused on in this series, but still, they look really good. Peanut especially was able to facilitate a lot in Game 1. Chovy was fine. He didn't really do much. He didn't have to in this series. Ruler was so ahead, and Doran was winning in top lane as well. So, Chovy was able to take a back seat, which has got to feel like a pretty good feeling, right? If you're arguably the best player in the world, and you can take a back seat, and your team can win 2-0 against a team that's 6-2 going into the series. Like, that's got to feel pretty good. So, yeah, Gen.G is a pretty scary team. Honestly, it very much feels like T1 and Gen.G are alone at the top right now. But as for Liiv SANDBOX, not an awful series. Definitely there have been worse for teams in the LCK, but not something you really wanted to see. Prince is going to be the dud of the series here. He was definitely outclassed, and that's really all there is to say. I think a lot of people were really mad with how low I put Prince in my LCK player rankings video, and I addressed it in that video as well because I knew it would be coming. A lot of people would see where I put him as way too low and who I put him below is too low. I think he's very good, but he's been very good for like 3 weeks, and I need to see him be very good for a little bit longer before I say that he's better than, like, Teddy. And this is why, because he really got outclassed by Ruler, like, heavily. They weren't even on the same planet in this series, and that's definitely a frustrating sign to see. Him and Kale obviously are a very good up-and-coming bot lane, but it's just very difficult for me to say that they are there right now. And obviously, losing to Ruler isn't, like, the end of the world or anything, and he's still a very, you know, quote-unquote young player. He's been playing a little while, but he's relatively new to the LCK. He's still relatively fresh-faced, and, you know, that means he can still grow quite a bit, I think, throughout the year, but I'm just a little bit hesitant on where to put him in the upper echelons of the AD carry space right now. You know, and this series, I think, is a good example of why, but there were players on Liiv SANDBOX that I thought played pretty well. Dove, honestly, had a pretty good Game 2 here on the Gangplank. Big reason why they were in that and actually up gold for pretty much most of Game 2 was Gangplank just had a bajillion gold in the top lane. He was doing a pretty good job there. And I thought Krako, honestly, you could say what you want about Krako. He's never afraid to go for the big plays, and that got them some leads early in the game. Obviously, it caused them some problems too, but you know, you would take that trade, I think, for the most part. You would take the trade of Krako being a good jungler, like that wants to take risks and wants to progress his team, rather than just being, like, hyper safe, doing nothing, being cuz, and nothing's getting facilitated across the map. All the solo laners have to facilitate for themselves. I would much prefer this. So I definitely think there are positive signs for Liiv SANDBOX. Just they don't have the talent to go up against a team like Gen.G and actually compete, unfortunately. But as for the outlooks of these two teams, Liiv's still good. Obviously, a little bit of the crack in the armor. It's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back later in the week. But for now, you know, it sucks that they lose to Gen.G, but everybody loses to Gen.G. As for Gen.G, a good series win here. I mean, the confidence to take a team fight down 4.5k gold late in the game in game 2 and just win it because you know you're better. Like, that's the kind of team that can win a world championship. And obviously, that's the aspiration for this team, and that's what they're looking like right now. Ruler and Lehens have really connected. Ruler looks like, you know, an absolute world beater. Doran's kind of starting to come into his own, and you know how high I am on Peanut and Chovy as a mid-jungle duo. Easily one of the best in the world, in my opinion, and they've proven that. So, yeah, I really think this Gen.G team, like, the sky's the limit. We all know that. It's them and T1 racing to the top. That's going to bring us to our second day of LCK Week 5 action, and we kick that second day off with a series between KT Rolster and DRX that KT was able to take in 3 games. This is a team that has really been coming on recently in terms of, they've stepped up their game a lot, I think, from spring into, I mean, honestly, from weeks 1 and 2 to weeks 3, 4, and 5. I think the difference in KT that we are seeing from then to now is extraordinary. And they are able to pull out the 2-1 series win here while looking pretty good doing it. Obviously, game 1 was close. Game 2 was also relatively close. Game 3 was not. KT kind of had that one from beginning to end. You could blame problems on draft, and I'll get into that in a bit, but let's go over what KT did right in this series. What KT did right was let Aiming go. I don't know what happened to Aiming. He's just not the player he's been for like 3 years now, which is awesome to see. I love it. But Aiming has always been this player that I've described as all hands, no brain, where he has such good mechanics as AD carry. He's really good in lane, and he does a lot of damage. He's able to dodge a lot of skill shots. His positioning in team fights is usually good. But man, he just gets so over-aggressive sometimes that he will Gale Force in and just die. And he will do 150 damage in a team fight, and you will lose the game because of that. And it's very frustrating to watch him. But now his leads are getting absolutely absurd to the point where it almost doesn't matter. I'm not saying that his mechanics and his brain haven't gotten better and haven't upgraded a tad bit, because they definitely have. He's certainly not dying as much as he used to for no reason at all. In fact, in this series, he died very, very little. I don't think he died at all in either of their wins. And that's got to be the biggest good sign for Aiming that you could possibly have, because that's, like, if you're getting Aiming with that, like, that is, you know, one of the, a really, really solid AD carry. Obviously, people were really mad that I put him even lower than Prince on my ADC rankings. It's because for 3 years now, Aiming has been a guy who has shown a lot of flashes of being very, very good, but is never able to consistently put that together for the full length of a split. I would love, absolutely love, if he were able to do that, but I have to see him do that. Right now, he's gotten 2 weeks in a row. This is the second week in a row where he has been genuinely phenomenal for this KT Rolster team. One of the best players in the league. If he can keep that going, he is going to force his way up those player rankings, and so will KT. Obviously, people were mad with how low KT was. You have to remember, going into this week, KT was 3-5. They have lost a lot of series. In fact, some to worse teams than them, in my opinion. And so, it's not like they were the most, I don't know, confident, like, inspiring team of all time, but some of their players are really starting to bounce back. Vikla, I think, is starting to show a bit. He wasn't great in this series. He definitely died a little bit more than he needed to, especially in that game 2, I believe, on the Silas. I think it was game 2 on the Silas. And then Cuz, what happened to Cuz? Like, he actually had a good series? That's kind of weird. He hasn't had one of those in quite a long time. So the 3 players I was most concerned about on KT Rolster have actually been the 3 that probably stepped up the most in this series in particular. But for DRX, on the other hand, they're just so inconsistent that when they don't get the picks that they really, really succeed on, it seems, or that they feel comfortable on, they really start to run it. And I don't know what the draft strategy is here for DRX. Obviously, Pioshik has some picks that we know he's much better on than others, and not all of them are banned out. That I can promise. Obviously, we know he likes the Poppy. We've seen that this split so far. He really, really likes that champion. He was really good on something like Hecarim last year. I don't even hate, putting him back on that. I know Hecarim isn't, like, great right now, but he's not terrible. We've seen him in other regions be successful. I wouldn't hate more of that. Less Bel'Veth is really what I'm asking. Bel'Veth is such a weak pick in a comp with Azir, Senna, Seraphine. Like, what are you actually trying to do with that comp? I don't talk about draft often on this channel because I think for the most part, draft diff is kind of a phrase that is sprinkled around pretty much every pro scene in order to have the audience have a concrete way of saying, like, this is why X team won or this is why X team lost or whatever, right? I think most of the time you can get over draft diff if you're the better team. Most of the time, I don't think it matters that much. But when you handicap yourself like this, going Bel'Veth, Azir, Senna, Seraphine, like, where exactly is your peel? Like, you have Olaf on the front line who just dies over and over and over again going in, and then you have absolutely nothing to stop the Viego, the Sylas, the Sedge, the Renata from just obliterating your team, and that's what happened in Game 2. It was really difficult for them to do that. Obviously, in Game 3, I like their draft a little bit better, but, it's still not great. I want to see Deft on a bigger carry. Like, he's on the Lucian here, but most of the season he's been on the Senna. He's been on the Kalista, and I like Kalista mostly as a pick, but let's see some Aphelios. Let's see some Zeri. I like that. He was really good on the Ashe in Game 1. He went, standard shield bow, Ginsu's Rageblade Ashe. Like, it's a little bit on hit, great, whatever. But, like, still, this is good. Like, more of that. He was really, really good in Game 1. We need more of that. Zika continues to be a positive and a negative, which I will also say for Kingen. Kingen, I think, was mostly a negative for this team last split. He's gotten a lot more consistent. Zika, I think, is really starting to come into his own a little bit. If this team can just, like, nail it down. Oh, also, Pioshik is my dud of the series. I don't think I said that. That Bel'Veth game in Game 2 was not good, and then he wasn't particularly perfect on the Trundle in Game 3 either. But if you can start getting that consistency, like, this team, like, it tantalizes you what they're capable of, because they're one of the teams that I really do believe can be a world contender based on how they have played at their best, but it seems like they are hell-bent on handicapping themselves at every possible measuring stick, and that includes in this series here against KT. So, outlook-wise, DRX is still a good team. I'm not sure they're as good as I think they are. Clearly, I think I'm being shown that I'm a little bit higher on them than maybe I should be. And maybe I'm a little bit lower on KT. Obviously, I want to see them continue to prove it. Cuz has had a really rough year. I think Vikla has certainly not proven anything, and Rascal has fallen off a tad bit. But if Aiming continues to play like this and they continue to rattle off wins against teams above them, it's going to be really, really hard to ignore how well this KT Rolster roster is doing. Moving on to our second series here of Day 2, we had DAMWON Kia taking on the Kwangdong Freecs. KDF, a DK2-0 win here, pretty solid, pretty good looking. I don't want to get my hopes up, but I'm starting to get my hopes up. DAMWON looks really good right now, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that I think they've really figured out a playstyle for this team. I think it really took some time for them to acclimate to getting Nuguri back in the top lane, but they've really, I think, figured out what their sweet spot is, which is Canyon very active in the bottom lane, trying to get Dekdom and Kellen ahead. Showmaker can be super proactive across the map. He can pick things like Zillion in Game 2 and just be a super supportive player and just be everywhere he needs to be. And Nuguri is like the weak side king here in the LCK. So I think that playstyle really, really worked. And we saw that especially in Game 2. Pretty much everybody on this team played their part and played it to perfection. Canyon was awesome in the early game, especially on Lee Sin. The Wukong game in Game 2 was also really good, but the Lee Sin game in Game 1 was really, really strong. Dekdom on Aphelios, like, I get it. Like, it's your signature pick. You can ball out on it, but, like, why do we keep giving it to him? Ban Aphelios against DAMWON. I'm at that point where I just don't get it. I don't get why you don't ban Aphelios against DAMWON. But alright, leave it up, sure. Kellen gets 2 games of Tom Kench. He really takes over the map, like, pretty much completely on that champion. In Game 1, it was very disgusting. He had pretty much pressure everywhere. There was absolutely nothing anybody could do. Oops. And, boy, Game 2. Shout out my boy Nuguri. He must have gotten ganked, like, I don't know, 45 times, dies 0 times, leads the game in damage charts. Keen ends up like, what, 0-4, 0-5 on the gangplank. Youch. It is a yikes for me. For me, you could give this to quite a few people in terms of player of the series. For me, it's going to go to Kellen. Like I said, he pretty much dominated the map in that game 1. He was also really, really scary in that game 2. Just really controlled the bot lane here. Aphelios Tahm Kench into Senna Seraphine was something that both sides were clearly willing to play because they picked it in 2 straight games. And the Aphelios Tahm Kench clearly was the better lane. It dominated both laning phases. So, as for KDF, it's a bad series, but not as bad as I think it could have been. I think Keen and Moham played really bad. Obviously, Keen is going to be my dud of the series. I really don't even think you can... He had one of his worst series, I think, as a pro here, at least in quite a long time. This was like the opposite of what you usually expect from Keen, who is someone who typically doesn't make ginormous mistakes. He was going for plays over and over again, and they very much did not work out. He got heavily outplayed by Nuguri the entire series, so he's rightfully, in my opinion, going to be my dud of the series here. But Moham wasn't much better. He was really bad on that Seraphine, constantly getting caught out by the Tahm Kench and blown up by the Aphelios. It was really easy for him to get online, mostly because that bot lane just had no pressure. Also, Elam is not good. Like, I know I've been saying it for quite a few weeks now, and it really isn't a surprise to anybody who's been watching, but Elam is like the worst jungler in the region. He's definitely fighting over whoever's playing for Fredit BRION at the time for that distinction, because he's just been really, really bad. His scoreline doesn't exactly show it here. He got 3 kills on the Lee Sin in game 2, but he did nothing. Like, he did nothing in the game. You know what I mean? Like, some games you just don't accomplish anything. He spent 8,000 years top lane, didn't accomplish anything, but he picks the Lee Sin, and then he farms for like, I don't know, 45 minutes? For the first actual 15 minutes of the game, he just power farms and he gets Dragon and great, but like, no plays are happening. Like, this was the problem with Cuz and Elam when they were on T1 a couple of years ago, was you would pick these proactive picks like the Rek'Sai and the Volley Bear, and they wouldn't do anything with them, and you're seeing that still here for KDF. So I hope they can figure it out. Teddy deserves better than this. He deserves better than to play Senna 2 games in a row. He deserves better than his entire team falling apart. Fate, I thought, was alright. He was on Swain Lissandra. Really, what was he going to do in this series? So, I don't know. Outlook-wise, I don't know. KDF is starting to worry me. I'm not exactly sure they're a playoff team, and they really didn't look like it in this series. They got obliterated. Keen looked bad, and Moham and Elam looked bad. Keen has been one of the players that I think has been one of their more consistent winners the entire split. Obviously, I've been saying it's him and Teddy that have really been the ones that have been successfully carrying this team. But if Keen's not playing there, if Teddy's the only one that is being even remotely, a positive for this roster, shout out Fate. He's been fine. But if Teddy's really the only one that's there to carry, like, this is not a playoff team. And so I'm worried about the outlook for KDF. But for DAMWON, you're going to love this. I mean, this was essentially the best series that they've had in forever. They never have clean 2-0s like this. So they're going to take this and love it. I imagine this is going to build a lot of confidence. And I really hope they continue to maximize this play style, because if you can get Dectum ahead, if you can get Kellen roaming around, Nuguri's really good on weak side, and Showmaker's a perfect glue player, like, you're going to make this team work. So hopefully we can see a little bit more of this DAMWON and less of what we had seen a lot of Summer Split up to this point. Moving on to day 3 here of week 5 LCK action. We kicked off day 3 with a series that I've been excited to talk about all week. Fredit BRION finally snapping the 0-8 start that they have gotten with a 2-0 series win over NS RedForce. Oh boy, like, this is, there could not have been a funnier outcome in League of Legends today. I think this is probably the funniest thing that could happen, is Fredit BRION just piling it on to NS. Like, I mean, just piling it on. Game 1 was all kind of close, but not really. Game 2 was just all Fredit BRION. This is a team that had won one game, not one series, one game. They were 1-16 going into the series, and they beat them. They beat them bad. So let's talk about it. Fredit BRION finally looks like the bro that we saw in spring. Lava was back in this one. He looked really, really good. He had a good game on the Azir in game 1, and a good game on the Ahri in game 2. Actually looked pretty good as well. Bel'Veth in game 1, who knew that champion could be played well into Poppy? That seems like a miserable matchup for Bel'Veth, but sure, is just better because they bring in a challenger jungler that just, quite frankly, isn't ready, which we'll talk about. But yeah, I mean, shout out and Lava, they were the carries for this team. Captain Morgan's back in. The captain's back on duty here. Got to play a tank in the top lane. Love it for him. Super excited that he was able to get a win there. I'm really excited that their first win of the year came with Morgan in the top lane. And then Henna and Delight were fine. They didn't really have to do anything. They played Ezreal Yuumi game 2, for Christ's sake. Like, They never had to do anything. Shout out. I really don't know what else to say here. Bro played fine. This looked like a spring version of Fredit BRION, like the type that was taking random games off of Kwangdong and off of KT Rolster. Like, this is the lineup that was doing it, and this is really what it feels like, with Lava kind of being the central point for what a lot of their gold wants to go to, and then Umti facilitating everything else. Like, this is exactly what you wanted to see here. So that's really good from Fredit BRION. Who this isn't good from is Nongshim, and they continue their absolutely horrendous fall. I shouldn't say fall. Their avalanche tumble down the mountain of whatever the LCK has become. This is not a good performance. You do not want to be the team that loses to the 0-8 Fredit BRION team. Alas, here we are. They have looked so bad in recent weeks. I've talked about it so much on this channel. I don't know if this is recoverable. I don't know if mental on this team is actually recoverable. I think they are tilted beyond belief, because we've seen these players get tilted before, specifically BDD. We've seen BDD on teams that haven't been good before, and at some point he just mentally checks out. And it really feels like that's what's happening. He had a miserable game 1 on Victor. He was very close to my dud of the series here, but that honor, of course, goes to Kana in the top lane, who has a wonderful 0-6 performance on Kennen in game 2. Really exactly what you want to see when your team is losing is you pick Kennen in the top lane and you just run it. You just completely run it. Yeah, this sucks. Obviously roster changes are coming. Sylvie comes in the jungle here for Dread. I certainly didn't think Dread was the problem. He hasn't been very good in the past few weeks, but to pretend like Dread's been the problem, I think is not fair. Sylvie comes in and is fine. Like, he doesn't do terribly. He's all right in the game 1 on Poppy, but you let Bel'Veth get ahead. Like, that's your fault. So, I don't know. And then Effort is still in here. Obviously, Snowflower can't play until the second round of LCK because of those stupid roster rules, which I still don't understand, because he wasn't on the team at the beginning of registration for round 1 of the round robin. He can't play until round 2. So I don't imagine Effort is long for the starting roster on this team, but for now, he's their only option, so he's in. Nobody else on this team is playing well. Like I said, BDD and Kana were awful this series. Sylvie was honestly fine. He just didn't actually play the game. He more so just played his own game. And then Ghost and Effort were blah, like whatever, who cares? Like, they're honestly better than they've been most of the year because they weren't the central problem for Nongshim. So, not a great look from Nongshim. Outlook-wise, is this the worst team in the LCK? Like, I'm starting to get there. I don't know. Like, on paper, they're obviously not, but like, mental-wise, they're just so broken and so destroyed that I really do believe that they might be the worst team in the LCK. They got definitively beaten by a Fredit BRION team that was 1-16 before this game. 2-0'd, and neither game was close. Like, it's disappointing. And so, maybe they are the worst team in the LCK. I don't know. I really don't. As for Fredit BRION, they're going to be stoked to get this first win of the season. That's got to be a huge weight off of their backs. Obviously, now they can go 10-8 and win Worlds, and everything will be fine. Obviously, it's not going to happen, but they're going to be happy with this win. I don't exactly know what this means for them. If they're not the worst team in the LCK anymore, I'm really going to have to think that over the course of this week, but yeah, I mean, shout out Fredit BRION. Like, good for them. They're going to be very, 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 very relieved to pick up this win. Moving on to the second series here of day 3, we had Liiv SANDBOX taking on Hanwha Life Esports. And shout out Liiv. Shout out Liiv. This is the bounce back that we were looking for. Yeah, I mean, they were able to do whatever they wanted in this series. Holy crap. A pretty easy 2-0 series win for SANDBOX. They're going to be very, very happy about it. Let's go over what happened. What happened was that Liiv was able to play their game plan again. Obviously, in the Gen.G series, what happened was that Gen.G was really good, and they took advantage of Liiv SANDBOX's weakness, which is the fact that they really feel like they are best when they play through this bottom lane. And they said, okay, well, we're just going to pump our bottom lane over and over and over again. We're going to get them so strong that, like, your bottom lane's not going to be able to carry, and you're not going to have any other map pressure to win that. But in this series, they just got to feed their bottom lane again. And Prince was able to carry again. And shout out, they were able to win a series 2-0 pretty easily because of that. So, yeah, Prince is my player of the series here. He's phenomenal. This team pumps every bit of resource they have into him. That him and Krakow are on like a tight leash, and Kale, for that matter, are on a very tight leash together for most of these games. And it very much works out because Prince is the carry. Like, Prince is the dude on this team, if you will. And that's not to take away from what the other two are doing, you know, Krakow and Kale in that instance, but Prince is really the one that they are funneling everything into. His mechanics are amazing. Had a phenomenal game on the Callista here in game 2. A very, very fun one to watch, and just is a very, very good player. Like, there's really nothing else to say. Krako is also a very good player, and he's really shown that all year long. Like, I think in summer, the biggest difference between this Liiv SANDBOX team, obviously, Prince coming in summer is obviously a pretty big upgrade, but the difference here is Krako has really returned to that 2021 form, which you really love to see. He was a little bit suspect in spring split, but he has really returned to some amazing form here in summer. Obviously, you know I love the Poppy pick. 2 games of Poppy is awesome. That game 1 was destructive. Like, it was, like, scarily good. And then Kayle. I think Prince's synergy with Kayle has really unlocked the rest of this team. Closer and Dove are fine. Closer had a pretty good series here. He was kind of styling on Karis, who we all know is probably the worst LCK mid laner. He was pretty much styling on him the entire series, so that's definitely something to look out for. And Dove. Honestly, Dove played really well as well. Like, there really wasn't a lot that Dove did wrong. He was just kind of ignoring farm for the most part and just trying to kill Dove, or trying to kill Dudu on the Ornn, which, you know, shout out. Like, that's how you play top lane. I'm really glad to see he's acclimating to his role swap. But, yeah, this LSP team is really looking to fire on all cylinders. This is a match they should have won, and they did in dominant fashion. As for Hanwha, still not a very good team. I mean, they took a game earlier this week off of a T1 team that I think they were really happy to take a game off of. This one, not so good. Chiani's still in, and he still definitely looks like an upgrade to SAMD. He very much was the lifeblood of this team in game 1. He was the reason that they had a chance, I think, at all. Obviously, at the end of the day, they really didn't, but I think he was the reason they were in it. Everybody else in this team played pretty much completely like trash. I should say Vista played all right in that game 1 as well, but this top side of the map is an absolute disaster. On Fleek is going to get my dud of the series again here. He was abysmal here on the Trundle, just getting out-jungled left and right by Krako, who obviously Krako's phenomenal. Like, I don't want to take that away. Krako's great. We all know how great Krako is, but On Fleek was bad today. And that showed. Karis was getting outclassed by Closer, getting styled on. Dove was just constantly engaging on Dudu, and there was absolutely nothing he could do on the Camille. Like, it was just not a good look for Hanwha. As for the outlooks of these two teams, Hanwha's a bad team. Like, they're a bottom-tier team. They're right there with Fredit, BRION, and Nongshim in terms of the worst teams in the league. This certainly doesn't change my opinion on that. I think they're still right there in that conversation. But for Liiv, you know, having that series earlier in the week where they got decimated by Gen.G and then watching them bounce back against Hanwha is a really good experience. But like I said, the thing that I was worried the most about that I mentioned in my player rankings video for Liiv SANDBOX still remains, is that if you have a team that really focuses this bottom lane and says, like, okay, we are not going to allow Prince to win us the game, do they have someone else that can win it? That question's still not answered for me, because Prince is still just winning the game for them. Obviously, I'd still love, I love to see how good Prince is, and it's great, but for this team to really unlock, they're going to need more than just Prince. And so, we're going to have to see. Obviously, Krako's starting to play really well. I'm not sure if he can be the focal point for the gold. You really want that to be like Closer, but Closer's definitely not shown that. Hopefully they can figure it out. Obviously, if they can just win every game like this, they're going to take it, though. And, they're never going to be mad with a clean 2-0 win where their AD carry just carries them to a victory. All right, moving on to day 4 of Week 5 LCK action. And we kicked off day 4 with a matchup between KT Rolster and the Kwangdong Freecs. KDF and KT Rolster taking another 2-0 series win off the back of Aiming being really, really good again. This is 4 straight series now for Aiming, where I would consider him arguably the best player in those series. Obviously, one of them they lost, but he was really good in that series that they lost to. He's just been phenomenal for this team. I mean, yes, he got Zeri in game 2, and Zeri in the LCK seems like an auto-win button, but, you still have to play it. And Aiming honestly played it really, really, really well into a very good AD carry. Obviously not a great bot lane here with Teddy and Moham, but Teddy's a very, very solid player, a player that I would consider, by most accounts, usually better than him. And he was better than him by a lot in this series. Not to say Teddy played badly, just to say Aiming was really, really great. So was Liiv. Liiv continues to be a really strong point for this KT Rolster roster. I've gotten really good at saying that, by the way. He continues to be a pretty strong point for that team. He was a strong point for them in spring as well. Even if Aiming wasn't exactly with him on every single play, Liiv continued to be a very, very good player for KT. And he continues that very much in summer. Obviously, Aiming has been their best player so far, but Liiv has certainly not been that far behind. And you know who had a very good series here? Vikla in the mid lane. Pretty underrated here, but he had a phenomenal game on the Sylas in game 1. He really was able to destroy Fate on that Gragas, a pick that he clearly picked up from DAMWON. Didn't work so well for DAMWON this week either, but Vikla was able to obliterate him on the Sylas, and he actually had a very good game 2 on the Galio here as well. Someone who has very quietly gotten better series after series after series. A lot of people were questioning why Arya was out and why Vikla was in. If he continues to grow and continues to get better like he is right now, I very much understand that decision because he looks like a much better fit into this lineup than Arya did. But that's still fine. Like, you know what happened that really, like, blows my mind? And I have to talk about this. It blew my mind. Cuz had 2 series in a row in 2022 where he was good. I feel like I rag on Cuz too much, but I'm very, very excited because if Cuz can get online, and if he can really start unlocking the mid lane of Vikla and the bot lane of Aiming in Life, and Rascal in the top lane, who, don't forget, was one of my spring darlings here on this channel, I really think this KT Rolster roster can compete for Worlds. Like, they really can get one of those 4 World spots if they keep clicking, and that is a very new development. I don't think at any point this year, other than right now, do I really feel like they've been able to do that, but I'm really, really excited in saying that. As for KDF, they've really started to taper off ever since beating T1. Feels like their confidence hit an all-time high and they got a little complacent. Most of that is due to the problems in the top lane, or the top side of the map, I should say. Keen has not been very good here. He was alright in Game 2 on the Aurelia. He was at least trying to make plays, but the Gangplank game in Game 1, really rough. Obviously, the Ravenous Hydra, like, Triforce build that we've seen people go, I get it into a matchup like Sejuani or Ornn, where you're just like, it doesn't matter if I do damage. I'm never actually gonna kill anybody. Might as well be tanky. But into Gwen, like, you can actually fight Gwen. You have to go crit here. And so I don't get that build at all when you're not going to somebody that is, like, aggressively tanky. Even like a Gnar, I think you have to go crit, right? And then Elam continues to be one of the worst junglers in the LCK. He has been all year long. It's been very disappointing to watch him. He's actually going to get my dud of the series here for KDF. Just was able to not do anything across the map. A very bad Game 2 on the Poppy, a pick that I would consider pretty strong into the Trundle specifically, but just got completely outplayed by Cuz, who has been one of the weaker junglers in the LCK as well. So definitely not a great sign there. Like I said, Teddy and Moham continue to not mesh. Moham, I think, is still an upgrade to Hoyt, who, when he, Hoyt was really bad in here, but Moham hasn't been, like, a ton better. He's just been a little bit better. And then Teddy is just kind of fighting for his life. Fate doesn't, no offense to Fate. I like Fate. He's a really good supportive mid laner, but he doesn't do anything when your team is losing. He picks the Gragas and he picks the Lissandra, and all the lanes are lost. So what does he do? He just loses. I talked about this earlier in my, a couple weeks ago in my reaction series here of, like, when Fate's on a losing team, he's actually kind of giga useless, and that's how it feels right now, where it's like, well, he's not playing bad, but, like, what does he do on this team? So shout out Teddy. It really feels like it's him in 4 wards. The Kog'Maw build is very suspect, to say the least, but, to each their own, right? Whatever. Aphelios, fine. That's a pick you should be able to carry on, but the team just collapsed around him. This is a rough KDF-looking team right now. I'm not convinced that this is a playoff team. They've certainly fallen out of a contention in my brain. Not contention, but the current, projections in my brain. Keen has really been on the downswing the past couple weeks. Elam continues to look bad. Moham continues to look bad. Fate continues to not really do much. And Teddy, what is he going to do with that around him? So, yeah, not super, outlook-wise, not super high on KDF. Really, really worried about them. But for KT Rolster, like, could this be a top 4 team in the LCK? Absolutely. Like, if this team went to Worlds, I would not be entirely surprised, right? Because truly, I don't even know if they're at their full potential yet. Vikla could get better. Cuz could kind of get back to a little bit of the form he had a couple of years ago. And if Rascal gets to spring form, like, this team is very dangerous. A very, very scary team. So right now it's aiming in pieces. If they grow into more than that, KT Rolster could be a serious threat in the LCK. Moving into the second series here of day 4, we had DRX take it on T1. Another 2-0. We're going to have a lot of 2-0s from here on out, so don't be alarmed by that. But yeah, T1 with a very clean 2-0 win here, although Game 2 was very close, I will say, while Game 1 very much was not. Game 2 was actually pretty close here between these two teams. Congrats to T1. They found a player in Zeus who has now eclipsed all of the wonderful prospects that they have ever had and has become the best player on T1. I will say it. He's the best player on the team right now, and he shows it game in and game out. That Gnar game in Game 1 was disgusting, only to be one-upped by the damage that he was doing on Gangplank in Game 2. This is why you build Crit Gangplank. You build Crit Gangplank to absolutely obliterate the enemy team. And who would have thought it obliterated the enemy team? Obviously, they still had some shortcomings here, and it wasn't quite as clean as you would imagine it to be, but still a very good series from T1 off of the back of Zeus being really, really good here. I think where you're looking at a little bit of concern was Gumayushi and Keria in Game 2. Certainly had some interesting plays. Owner as well on the Lee Sin. Definitely a pretty big misplay there in Game 2, but we'll get to that. But the Draven Pike, pulling out the Draven Pike bottom lane, which is always fun to see in Pro. Obviously, we saw the Draven Blitzcrank in Game 1, which was good, but it didn't matter. Like, it was fine. It was good. The Blitzcrank did a lot of cool things, but at the end of the day, they were going to win that game with or without the Blitzcrank. So, but the Game 2 Draven Pike, this generated so much pressure for T1 and also pressure against T1 because they had to be so careful of Guma and Keria. Keria died so much just getting caught by the Vi or getting caught by the Nautilus. Zika got, getting some kills. Like, Deft was like 6-0 at one point in this game on the Aphelios because Owner goes in for a Lee Sin, double Q kick combo, right, to kick the Aphelios back into the enemy team. Oops, the Vi walks in, hits the Vi, kicks the Vi. The Vi now just gets to Q the backline, gets to Q the Draven, gets to Q the Azir, gets to upset the entire process. And Aphelios gets to free hit, and he gets like a bunch of kills. He's like 6-0. The fact that DRX lost this game is entirely on the fact that their macros sucked. But also on the flip side, T1's macro is really, really good. That's something you can always expect out of T1. They have been for a while. Owner has really good macro. Obviously, Faker. Like, I don't need to say that. But Keria also has really good macro. We've seen all of these players be really successful, macro-wise on their own, making good decisions. And I think that bleeds over into a team mentality as well, with T1 just being very successful in terms of late game and mid game scaling, like taking an advantage, transitioning it to late, or being comfortable to go behind in gold, which I think T1 was in this series. But overall, they just looked very good. As for DRX, like I said, they definitely had a chance in Game 2. Game 1, they did not. That was a disgusting game, and it was a really bad one for Pioshik. Pioshik gets subbed out in Game 2 here for Juhan. Yuhan, I don't know how to say it. Whichever one it is, I'm sorry that I said it wrong the first time. But he was fine. He was actually okay in Game 2. He did a little bit on the Vi. Obviously, like I said, he walked in front of Owner's Lee Sin, and that kind of got Deft super fed. But at the same time, he was a little bit proactive on the map. I hope this is a kick in the teeth for Pioshik, who we all know he can be a top 4 jungler in the LCK. We all know he has that kind of potential, but he just hasn't consistently been able to show it. He has these games on this, like he had on the Xin Zhao in Game 1, where he's just giga bad. Not only is Xin Zhao a giga bad champion right now, but Pioshik was running it, getting blitz hooked all the time. There was absolutely nothing he could do. Owner outplayed him into oblivion. He's my dud of the series, I should say. I have to color code both Pioshik and Juhan here, but it really is Pioshik. Shout out. Pioshik was really, really bad here. And then, I think the bright spot for this team has to be Deft. He finally gets put on non-Senna duty, which it feels like he's been on the entirety of 2022 summer. And he goes like 6-0 on Aphelios, and the rest of the team throws it away. More of this. Deft is your win condition. I don't know why I have to be the one to tell DRX to play around first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time, Deft. But do it. He's really freaking good at League of Legends. And if you give him the opportunity, he will win you games. Zika also had a very good game on the Akali in Game 2. Kind of subtle. Beryl was alright on the Nautilus. Just in general, a much closer Game 2 that if they had a more cohesive macro decision maker, which right now it feels like it has to be Beryl calling. Like, I don't know who else on this team is calling, especially with Pioshik out. They probably win that Game 2. And they force a Game 3. I'm not saying they would have won the series or anything, but, a 2-1 looks better than a 2-0 at the very least. So, I don't know. DRX is really in free fall mode right now. I'm not saying that they are, like, completely out of Worlds contention or anything like that. We're not even still one of the favorites to get to Worlds, but they definitely have some problems to figure out because, like, they are not at the same level as the top 3 teams. Even DAMWON, I think at this point, has proven that they are just not on the same level as DRX. Even with DRX beating them, it just feels really hard to have DRX above them, but yeah, outlook of these two teams, like I said, DRX is, really competing for that final world spot. I think the top 3 are pretty clear. Top 2 are definitely in their own tier, and then there's DAMWON. I think the next couple teams, I think, are all right there, and DRX is right in that mix. They need to figure this out. Hopefully this lights a fire under Pioshik, because that's what's really going to improve this team the most. But if Yuhan comes in here and is, like, the guy for them, and he can be, like, a consistent presence for them, obviously, that is a huge plus as well. So whatever ends up working out for them. I hope it works out soon because it is not looking good right now. As for T1, they're one of the top 2 teams. Like, what else do I have to say? They looked phenomenal here. Zeus is one of the best players in the world at this point. Guma and Carrier, even on their bad days, playing Draven Pike, still look good in the late game. Still get those cash outs. Owner's phenomenal. Faker might be the worst player on the team. Imagine that. Like, that's unfreaking believable to say. Like, T1's just disgustingly good. So there's really not much to say about them. Overall, they're the best. They're the best. They're number 1 in my power rankings for a reason. Moving on to the final day here of LCK Week 5 action. We kick off Day 5 with a matchup between DAMWON Kia and Fredit BRION. Fredit BRION obviously notoriously the DAMWON Killers, the Kingslayers. Nah, they don't get it done. I think this might be the first split since both of these teams have been in the LCK together that Fredit BRION actually hasn't been able to beat DAMWON in either series. Real tough break there for Fredit BRION, but DAMWON, of course, being the better team, actually finally manages to beat them twice in one split. Congratulations to them. Both games were super dominant. Bro never stood a chance. Good for them. Good for DAMWON. Let's talk about what they did right. This bot lane continues to keep getting Aphelios. Like, at some point, are we going to be like, no more Aphelios? Like, when do we start banning Aphelios against DAMWON? Said it in the last series, I'll say it again here. They are a completely different team when their bot lane has Aphelios versus when their bot lane does not have Aphelios. But Fredit BRION said, I think Tahm Kench is the problem there, which I get. Kellen had a phenomenal game on the Tahm Kench. He had an even better one on the Nautilus in Game 2. Shout out Kellen. He's my player of the series. He's really good. But decked him on Aphelios, that's what he plays. And if you let him play it every game, he's going to look really good. There's so many weird drafting decisions in the LCK that I simply do not understand. Like, it's really hard for me to say this, but like, why do you not target Prince every game? Why do you not target aiming every game? Why do you not ban Aphelios against Dectum? Like, these are no-brainers to me. And yet, teams just don't seem to care. I really genuinely believe it is an ego thing. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but, like, these teams that just, I don't know if they get, like, if they know, if they do the research, like, I don't know. You have to ban it. It is a must ban now, but yeah, Dectum and Kellen were great. I'll jump off of that. Showmaker was really good in this series, too. Someone who I think has been getting a lot of flack, some deserved, some not deserved this year. He's been fine. I think he certainly hasn't been the best, mid laner in the LCK, but at the same time, he's not really been a problem. He's never been the problem for DAMWON in their losses. It's pretty much always been their bot lane not performing up to expectation, but he has a really good Game 1 here on the Taliyah. His Game 2 on the Taliyah is also good. He just has other players on the team performing really well as well. Canyon continues to play Viego and continues to do bullshit things on Viego because that champion is stupid. And then happy birthday, Nuguri. It was his birthday and he got a win, so really, really happy for him there. Shout out. There's really nothing else to say there. DAMWON looks really good. Fredit BRION doesn't get to celebrate their win earlier in the week against Nongshim for much longer. Lava, the driving force in that win, and the driving force in a lot of their wins in spring, really disappointed in this game. He's my dud of the series here. Obviously, if there's been any mid laner in LCK that has had Showmaker's number over the years, it's been Lava, weirdly enough. But Lava really didn't show up in this one. He absolutely runs it on Azir in Game 1, has a really, really bad game. Mispositioned all the time, very much targeted by the Taliyah walls, and just not able to accomplish much. And then B1 picks it in Game 2. Not probably the best choice there. Doesn't do very well in Game 2 either. But then they also picked the Bel'Veth for in Game 2, which is just something that I just don't think is very strong right now. I think it can work in niche scenarios, but certainly not within Azir. I think that's a very weak lane, combination. Because you really don't have any sort of peel there outside of Azir's shuffle, which he wants to use to engage for the most part. But I don't know. This is just tough. Like, Bro losing isn't the end of the world or anything. Henna and Delight got outskilled here by Dectum and Kellen. But like I said, Dectum was on his premier champ. I think the Kalista into Aphelios matchup is honestly pretty Kalista favored, like very heavily Kalista favored. But they couldn't win that because Dectum's really good on Aphelios. Ezreal's another good pick. I really don't like the Leona pick here at support, but, whatever. It's fine. That loses as well. Honestly, Bro was just worse. They lost in draft. They lost in game. That's it, right? There's really nothing else to say. They continue to look like one of the worst teams in the LCK, outlook-wise. Their win over Nongshim, I don't think was that spectacular. It really wasn't, like, game-breaking for me here. It doesn't change my perception of what this Fredit BRION team was, and clearly that stands here as they get obliterated by DAMWON. But DAMWON continues to look better week by week by week. Hopefully they can continue this upward improvement. Like I said earlier in the week, really feels like they found a playstyle, but hopefully they can keep that playstyle without Aphelios, because eventually teams are going to learn to ban that champion against them. I just assume it's going to be sooner rather than later. That's going to bring us to our final series here of Week 5 LCK action, and it was another stomp, another not close series, this time between Gen.G and NS RedForce. Nongshim continued to get completely obliterated, this time by an actually good team, so it's at least somewhat understandable, but yeah, I mean, Gen.G continues to roll. This team is, like, terrifying. When Peanut plays Poppy, they win, and then they're like, ah, man, I guess we have to ban Peanut's Poppy, but then we give him Wukong, and then he still wins. So, yikes. Like, I don't even like the Game 2 draft from Gen.G. Everyone knows I do like the Twitch Yuumi lane. I think it's very, very good. I think it's very underrated. I hate the Ryze. The Aatrox is kind of nothing, especially into a Gragas top. Okay, sure. What are we, 2020? But I'll take it. Whatever. You know, but Peanut is able to carry both games. He's facilitating Ruler to get super far ahead in Game 1, who is just able to do 1,000,000 damage on the Jinx. And then in Game 2, he just carries it himself on the Wukong. Not that Ruler's not doing an absolute boatload of damage on the Twitch. It's just a very, very scary team to go into because I have said all of this. And you know whose name I haven't said? Chovy. And Chovy's the best player on the team. Like, it's disgusting how good they are because they can win from anywhere on the map. And that's the scary part, is Peanut enables so much because he's such a proactive and facilitating supportive jungler that you can have Chovy in the mid lane, you can have Ruler in the bot lane, you can have Doran in the top lane, and all of them can get resources, and they can flip-flop each game. Doran's really good on weak side. Chovy's really good at playing the Ryze and playing for more split-push supportive styles. Ruler can be the hyper carry, but he can also play something like Senna if you want to give Chovy a carry. Like, everybody here is so flexible that it's pretty much impossible to see an avenue where this team loses draft. And I think that gives you so much flexibility as a team for how you want to play, generally speaking, because you don't really have a weak point. You can't outdraft this team, quote-unquote, because they have so many avenues of winning. You can't take away a section of the map in the way that I've been talking about for a team like Liiv SANDBOX, where if you take away bot lane, like, what else do they have? Gen.G doesn't have that problem. If you take away bot lane, they have Chovy. If you take away Chovy, they have Doran. If you take away Doran, they have Ruler. Like, what do you do? So, yeah, Gen.G's really good. I'm not spoiling anybody's season here by saying that. Nongshim is not good. This team continues its free fall. Snowflower is eligible to play here for Nongshim. Great, he comes in and looks awful. Really don't understand why you bring in Snowflower. Obviously, I didn't expect him to come in and be good, especially on a team that is in complete free fall mode, but he comes in as, like, really bad in games 1 and 2. He gets completely outclassed by Ruler and the Hens. That Twitch Yuumi bot lane obliterated him in game 2. The game 1, though, was meh. Like, he set Ghost up all right on the Misfortune, but that was mostly just off the back of Ghost being okay in game 1. Probably one of his better games in a while. Snowflower certainly isn't the only problem, but, man, how bad must Peter be doing? Like, you had Peter here. This team looked their best when Peter was in last split, like, in spring. How bad could he possibly be doing in scrims? For them to not just say, like, let's at least give him a shot, rather than bring in Snowflower, who hasn't played in over a year. Like, it's just a very puzzling decision here from Nongshim, but BDD is also playing really bad. He has 2 really, really rough games here, especially the Sylas in game 2. He counterpicks the Sylas in game 2 here, and is not rewarded. Very much not rewarded. He looks like he's completely mentally checked out. I know he had troubles recovering from COVID after the whole Nongshim team was hit, essentially, by COVID in spring. Hopefully, none of that is factoring in, because if it is, that's really unfortunate, and you want to see a player like BDD, who's a historic player here in the LCK, kind of get back to form, but right now, he's just been very, very bad. There's really no other way to put it. He was all right at the beginning of the split, but he is just mentally checked out. He's making stupid mistakes. It just isn't working out for him. Sylvie is definitely not an upgrade to Dread. I don't know if you just want to try him, because Dread is, like, super coin flippy as a jungler, which we've talked about on this channel, but Sylvie's certainly not an upgrade. Kana continues to be meh. He had a really bad series earlier in the week. He was fine in this one, but again, didn't really matter. This whole team just kind of sucks. Outlook-wise, Nongshim might be the worst team in the league, and Gen.G is one of the best. Like, Nongshim loses to Fredit BRION, gets obliterated by Gen.G. There could not be a bigger downward slope that a team has been on in the LCK this year than what Nongshim is on right now. They have pretty much completely eliminated themselves from playoff contention, purely from just whatever this awful, awful slump is for them. Obviously, I hope they can get out of it. I'm certainly not betting on that. I very much expect them to be near the bottom of the standings for the rest of the year. Gen.G will be at the top, though, because they're Gen.G and they can win anywhere, and just because they may not be T1, and I'm not even saying that they're not T1, obviously they lost, but it was very close. Like, they're still one of the best teams in the world. To me, they're one of the top 2 to 3 teams in the world. You can make a case for top 4, but for me, top 2 to 3 teams in the world, Gen.G is right in there, and they absolutely deserve to be. They can win anywhere, and I'm very scared of them. Hopefully, they can actively fulfill their destiny and finally give Chovy the Worlds run that he absolutely deserves. All right, that is going to do it for my Week 5 LCK overview and analysis. Up on the screen right now, you are going to see the updated LCK standings from 1 to 10. And then right next to that, in the first column, will be my personal power rankings of those teams from 1 to 10 with how that has changed as well. We can go over the biggest risers, the biggest fallers. Risers this week, there were quite a few, but I think all of them make sense when you look at the fallers first. Nongshim falling to 10. At this point, I just can't. They have to prove to me they can win a game. Once they prove to me they can beat someone, I'll bring them out of 10. They're better than this. They absolutely are. But I don't believe that they are going to play better than this. I really believe the mental of this team is so destroyed at this point that they're just going to be 10th the rest of the year. I really don't see a lot of upside for this team. So hopefully they can figure it out, but they've now lost to the 2 teams that are worse than them in the standings. I'm out. I'm out. That means Bro and Hanwha Life move up 1. Congrats. They didn't deserve it, but they do it anyways. Hanwha Life takes a game off of T1. I guess that's something, but Bro beats Nongshim. Cool. It's still not good. Not good. Neither of them are good, right? But the bottom 3 are just not good. Other risers this week, DAMWON jumps DRX. DRX drops down to number 4 in my power rankings. And this is where I'm going to know. This is a little bit of a social experiment for me. This is where I'm going to know who actually listens to what I say, rather than just looks at the graphic and types angrily in the comment section. Yes, I know DRX is bad, and I know that they probably aren't the 4th best team in the LCK right now. Do I believe they can get there? I think they can. Do I think they will? I don't know. The difference between 4, 5, and 6 in my power rankings, the difference between DRX, Liiv SANDBOX, and KT Rolster is completely negligible. It is completely negligible. You could put any of them at 4, and I'd believe you. You could put any of them at 6, and I believe you. But right now, this is what I'm going with. If you really want to complain about it in the comment section below, go ahead. But if you go, oh, how is DRX ahead of Liiv SANDBOX, or how is DRX ahead of KT Rolster? They're not. Like, they are, but, like, they're not. You know what I mean? They're all equally ranked in terms of my power rankings. They have to separate themselves from each other in the upcoming weeks. And then the other riser, or the other faller this week, I guess because of that, KT jumping up to 6, is the Kwangdong Freecs KDF falling out of the playoffs. They really just haven't had it in the last couple weeks ever since beating T1. They just feel off as a team. KT is definitely better than them right now. Hopefully they can get back into form, but I'm not sure even if they do that, they'll be able to catch the top 6, who really feel like the favorites to make playoffs at this point in time. My player of the week, though, I had a couple options. 2 main options, and I was really, really torn. I spent a lot of time actually going through and trying to figure out which one of these I was going to give it to, but for me, I eventually decided on Aiming from KT Rolster. He was phenomenal this week. Really, really, really good. Probably the best week of his career, and he's been playing quite a long time, but Aiming was really, really good. I know a lot of people want me to give it to him, and honestly, I get it, and he deserves it, so I'm giving him the Week 5 Player of the Week. I was very close to giving it to Kellen on DAMWON, who also had a really phenomenal week for DAMWON. Really, really underrated week. I'm not going to say they're co-players of the week, but they are very, very close. I'm going to give it to Aiming, but Kellen also had a great one. My dud of the week, my player of the week, who I think was the worst, is going to go to On Fleek on Hanwha Life, who was really just out-jungled in every single game he played. There is another jungler who I very much considered giving this to, naming Pioshik on DRX, who was, again, really bad. I think what saved Pioshik, though, overall was the fact that he actually didn't play 4 games this week. He only played 3. On Fleek had 4 bad games where Pioshik only had 3. Yes, Pioshik getting subbed out is probably a bigger telltale sign, but for me, On Fleek showed that he was bad in 4 straight games. Pioshik, we can only imagine. So On Fleek gets the Dud of the Week award, but Pioshik right on the edge of that as well. But that is going to do it for my Week 5 LCK video. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like. It really does mean a lot to the channel. Let me know down in the comment section what your game of the week was, who your player of the week, your dud of the week, whatever you want to talk about, the team you think is underrated, overrated, all that stuff. I love chatting it up with you guys down in the comment section below. But with that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.